We are very excited for the Investment Summit and delighted to host an event that has brought together so many business leaders from around the world. I would also like to take a moment to thank two of our main sponsors, Mr. Miki Vlichkovsky, excuse me, who has provided us with our wine for the evening. And also Mr. Daniel Sass, who is our telecommunications partner. We will also have two keynote speakers for the evening. Mr. Mike Zafirowski will be introducing Mr. Andy Pakoff, and Mr. Robert Arsoff will be introducing Dr. Kurt Geiger. At this time, I would like to introduce Mr. Mike Zafirowski.
Благодарам, дами и господа. Добро вечер. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure to be here this evening. I'll keep my comments really short, but really look forward to the comments in the next 2 days of activities. When we were organizing this in the last 6 months, I had pretty high expectations, and frankly, all those high expectations have been significantly surpassed, both from the diaspora involvement as well as from people from Macedonia. So I cannot be any more pleased and proud to be a Macedonian to see all this interest. And I think the thing which we always have in common is how to help Macedonia become a stronger nation. We have many significant people here this evening, ministers, ambassadors, chief executive officers, so I'll not try to introduce anybody except to thank the Prime Minister Nikola Gruevski for being here this evening. I had the pleasure of witnessing a wonderful event this afternoon, Kemet Electronics, a company that eventually will employ 500 employees, opened a brand new facility today at the free zone. It was an excellent activity, and he could not be more complimentary. The teamwork among all the Macedonian ministers, the Invest in Macedonia, the promoters, so I thought it was a wonderful event, and hopefully we'll have many of those to come in the days, months, and years ahead. Personally, I have two objectives over the next couple of days. One, to get all of us more engaged, diaspora, business leaders, universities, and the government, to renew the commitment to make Macedonia a stronger country. And second, for the outside investors, for us to showcase the capabilities within Macedonia and what's here if they decide to invest in this country. But I'll stop right there. It's a real pleasure to introduce one of the most successful business people in the United States. Andy Pakoff started his company, Niagara Bottling Company, back 49 years ago, in 1963. He started as a milk run driver, and in the last 49 years, with a combination of innovation in packaging, promotions, and transportation, he's built the largest independent company in the Western Hemisphere. Last year, they shipped 21 billion bottles of water. It's 21 billion, more than 1 billion in revenues. And he's the ultimate entrepreneur. When everyone sees problems, he sees opportunities. He loves to educate, to mentor young entrepreneurs, and I was thrilled when he agreed to be on our board. So without much further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a great Macedonian, a great American, Andy Pakoff. Andy, thanks for coming.
Well, if I was only half that good, it'd be terrific. But anyway, good evening, Macedonians and friends of Macedonia. Welcome. Many of you traveled great distances to be here tonight, and we thank you all for coming. I'm Andy Pakoff, a proud Macedonian from California. MK 2025 is a nonprofit organization that loves all Macedonians and is dedicated to helping Macedonia. As the most recent board member of MK 2025, I'm often asked, why did I join? And what are our objectives? Diaspora Macedonians care about the future of the Republic, whether we live in America, Canada, Australia, Brazil, or anywhere else. We love our Macedonian heritage, and we want to help Macedonia prosper. Each Macedonian mother and father taught their children some of the same things. The keys to a happy life are strong family values, strong work ethic, and strong savings ethic. Whatever you do, stick to it. Get busy. Do it. Do it yourself. Don't wait. Don't wait on others. Successful Macedonians know that mom and dad were right. Problems are our friends on the road to success. Never give up, and work hard, and work smart, and work long enough to find your ways through problems. We built Niagara Bottling from scratch to a $1 billion company, following what mom and dad taught us. Successful Macedonians and friends of Macedonia, successful friends of Macedonia, are here in Ohrid to share what we have learned and the many ways to grow the economy in the Republic, including work ethic, entrepreneurship, investment by Macedonians, savings ethic, education at home and abroad, mentoring, internships, government incentives, and direct foreign investment. Prime Minister Gruevski, President Ivanov, and their teams are doing wonderful things to develop foreign investment in manufacturing with free trade zones, attractive tax rates, incentives, and a business-friendly environment. Also, thanks to Prime Minister Gruevski, President Ivanov, and their teams, downtown Skopje is undergoing exciting transformation with many new buildings and offices. Our proud Macedonian heritage is now visible. Macedonia is an import-based economy. Trucks leave Macedonia empty. Export freight is a bargain. Many European products can be manufactured more efficiently and more profitably within the Republic. We need to open the eyes of young Macedonian entrepreneurs to learn to manufacture in the Republic and export to the industrial powerhouses of Europe at higher quality and at competitive rates. Macedonia is also blessed with good climate and rich soil and abundant natural water, with opportunities for excellence in exporting many agricultural products. Skopje and Ohrid are both natural tourist destinations. Many possibilities, yet our economy is not booming. In the old system, all things came from the government, and entrepreneurs were discouraged. Socialism did not understand free enterprise or free markets, and these old habits die hard. As a result, here's the good side. Opportunities are all around us. For the most part, however, they are going unnoticed. MK 2025 and the diaspora mission is to open the eyes of Macedonian entrepreneurs. The future is now for Macedonians to make their dreams come true. These are exciting times for all Macedonians. God bless you all, and God bless the Republic of Macedonia. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Robert Arsa, Vice Chairman of Macedonia 2025.
Dobro večer na sita. I'm going to turn to English immediately. I'm not going to spend my time too much talking to you right now, but I have actually an extreme pleasure to introduce a dear friend of mine, okay? Someone who I've known now for over almost 12 years. It's been a mentor, inspiration, and it's somebody I have lots of respect for because he did something that not many people did when he did it, which is to become the leading force of investments in Macedonia, and actually to date, the largest investor in Macedonia, under any kind of a metric, okay? Over the last 20 years since we've become an independent country. And in his prior life, he's actually had a career, extensive career of being a banker for about 35 years, or more over 35 years. Sorry, Kurt, I'm going to embarrass you. How old are you here? But 35 years, and he's actually worked around the globe. 15 years at Chase Corporation, which became JP Morgan Chase, had held function around the globe, worked in the United States, Wall Street, worked in Hong Kong for Chase, came back to the continent of, I think, UK, worked for HSBC, correct, I got it right, and then after that he came actually to EBRD, where he led basically the private equity investment effort for investments in financial institutions, and actually led basically in the beginning of the 1990s, basically led the effort of actually investing about $4 billion of equity in Southeastern Europe, this whole region. And coming to Macedonia, investing in lots of the banks in Macedonia when nobody was willing to even approach the region, in the middle of all the civil wars were happening in the middle of the 90s. And then he also extended about $7 billion worth of loans. So total about $11 billion of a portfolio, which he actually personally kind of led the charge on. And I was pretty encouraged. I got the idea of, who do we invite tonight, and I felt somebody who has the perspective, has actually seen the country in the transition over a period of now 15 years that he's actually known Macedonia, cares for Macedonia. So he can actually share his little bit of a perspective of how the country has progressed, and as well just his opinion on just overall perception of the country today versus when he first came in Macedonia, which was, I think, 1997, coming in Macedonia. So with that, again, I want to introduce Dr. Kurt Geiger. He's actually currently on the I forgot to mention, he's currently a member of the supervisory board of Raiffeisen. He sits on board of a few private equity funds that invest in Southeastern Europe. He has other engagements as well. He's a well-known figure in the European kind of capital markets arena, and I'm extremely happy to actually have him here today so for him to share a few words with us. But with that, Dr. Kurt Geiger, my dear friend, if you can join us.
Macedonia 2025 is helping to build a stronger nation. And what that means is, in order for the economy to prosper, you really need democracy, openness, simple processes for businesses to engage in here, a very good legal system, and a reliance on the force of law. And I experienced many of these things, and your country had great difficulty to break up, as we all know, of the former Yugoslavia, and there were many complications, and it didn't really help to become or to get on the list of investors and all this. But actually, if you look at today's environment of the world economy and the difficulty parts of Southeast Europe is having, mainly because of engagements of countries that are now in difficulty, and we're all suffering from that, and this is not a very good situation. But it also meant that Macedonia really was a little bit isolated from international transactions, and this helped the country to grow slowly. And if one takes some lessons of what has happened over this massive and very fast transition process over the last 20 years, was really that Macedonia grew slowly but steadily. I think it had very good monetary policies here, a very strong and solid and conservative national bank that really made very, very good rules and was difficult with the banks and difficult in the right way in many ways. And this proves it. And this is why you have been really isolated from from the problems that many of the neighbors of Macedonia actually have. My own experience has been that this is a wonderful country, and when I remember what I've seen when I first came here, and I mainly traveled only to Skopje. I never have been able to come here, although it was always recommended by everybody of my business friends here. And, but I never took the time to do so, so I'm very grateful that you invited me to come here and participate in this summit. And I do think it is wonderful to see the diaspora to come back to their home country and to their roots. And I feel this passion here to come and give something back. And give something back not only in terms of money, but to give it back in terms of experience, encouragement, and particularly what I think is very important is this passion. And therefore, I very much look forward to be able to participate in the discussions over the next 2 days. And I do hope that this passion will give everybody encouragement to go, get on with it, and actually take the many opportunities which really exist here. And I hope that everything will be going really very well, and the country will continue its prosperous way and accelerate the pace of this transition. Thank you very much for having me here tonight.
Thank you very much. If I can ask people in the back to please keep your conversations for later. For people from all over the world, so I think part of the protocol, we should respect each other. So while people do this discussion, I'm going to very much appreciate saving your discussions for a little bit later on. But Andy, what a great talk. Thank you very much. Kurt, thank you for everything you've done and for being an $11 billion investor in the region, a huge friend of the country, so thank you very much. We have an unexpected pleasure. The Prime Minister has asked to welcome all of you. He'll have a speech again tomorrow about how seriously he takes the issue of economic development. You can argue economic development is not the most important thing in a society, but without economic development, you cannot have many of the other things which you want to have. So that's why the importance of economic development from diaspora and the local businesses. So a great friend from business, a great friend of economic development and open markets. It's a great pleasure to introduce the Prime Minister of the Republic of Macedonia, Nikola Gruevski.
Dobro večer na site. Good evening to everybody. As Mark Zafirovsky said, I have a speech tomorrow on the opening ceremony or the opening session. And I just wanted now to say welcome to all of you, dear Macedonians from our diaspora, dear businessmen from our diaspora, businessmen from Macedonia, friends of Macedonia, members of Macedonia 2025. I know that you are here with a good will, with a good thought, with idea to help to Macedonia. And in this point of view, I would like to express welcome to Macedonia. And I would like also to thank you for your presence here and for your efforts, which you already showed in the past. Many of you, Mark Zafirovsky especially, in many occasions, especially when we are working for some investors, when we are trying to reach him or to convince him. Thank you very much, Mike. Several years ago, Mark Zafirovsky visited Macedonia and we met. And in that period, there was not idea of such kind of non-profit organization which has to help to Macedonia. But after these meetings, many debates, exchanging of ideas, Mike decided to collect more successful Macedonians which are living outside, and with common efforts, together with Macedonians which are living here, with Macedonian businessmen to try to help to Macedonia. This is something that we really appreciate, and we appreciate your presence here in Macedonia, in Ohrid. Thank you very much for this, and I hope that you have good days here in Ohrid and in Macedonia. And through these discussions that will come, I believe we'll come to many ideas which will help to all Macedonians, to Macedonia, and to all of you, to the friends of Macedonia. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome. Thank you for all joining us for the Macedonia Global Investment Summit. At this time, I would like to welcome Zoran Martinovski.
Почитувам председателе на владата на Република Македонија, господин Никола Груевски, почитувани министри, екселенции, ценети представници на приватниот сектор, почитувани гости, дами и господа. Најпрво би сакал во својство на председавач на овој настан, како и во името на бордот на директори на Македонија 2025, да ви посекам срдечно добре дојде во древниот Охрид на отварањето на глобалниот инвестицијски самит за Македонија. Настан на вакво ниво, со волкав број на присутни, и за ваква тема би било од големо значење за секоја земја. Важноста на глобалниот инвестицијски самит за Македонија е особено големо затоа што станува збор за прв инвестицијски настан од ваков формат што има директна цел да им овозможи на заинтересираните инвеститори да се запознаат со ресурсите и со можностите со кои располага Македонија, но може би поважно да се сретнат со луѓето кои што живеат и работат во нашата земја. Дозволете ми да ги поздравам и сите оние кои овој настан го следат во живо преку телевизиските станици или преку интернет мрежата. Се надевам дека дискусиите на ова средба ќе бидат од корист за сите вас, кои не сте директно дел од овие збиднувања во Охрид. Задоволни сме што овој самит на едно место собра голем број на инвеститори, бизнис лидери и професионалци од еминентни домашни и странски компании. И со тоа израсна во најголем деловно економски форум одржан досега во Македонија, а насочен кон промоција на можностите за инвестиции во Македонија и извоз на македонските компании, како и кон остварување на врски помеѓу македонскиот бизнис и диаспората. На наше големо задоволство, тука е владиниот економски тим, кој ќе ги презентира развојните можности на Македонија и кој ќе им понуди помош и соработка на сите заинтересирани странски инвеститори. Една од целите на самитот е намирање на македонската бизнис диаспора и нејзино поврзување со домашните компании. Често слушаме на кој начин диаспората е дел од успешните приказни на некои земји. Ние сме на добар пат да изградиме цврста платформа за соработка која во иднина ќе биде основа за градење на многу заеднички бизниси и отварање на странските пазари на македонските компании. Во светот има многу способни бизнис професионалци од наше потекло, кои сигурен сум дека со својата експертиза, знаење и контакти можат многу да помогнат за економскиот развој на Македонија. Тука би сакал да го споделам со вас и дел од своето лично искуство на овој план. Во 90-тите години јас имав можност да се образувам и да работам во Соединетите Американски држави, каде што имав прилика да се запознам со неверојатни луѓе, научници, професори, бизнисмени од македонско потекло, кои имаа голема енергија и ентузијазам да помогнат на својата татковина. Отогаш почнав да размислувам за придобивките што би ги имала Македонија од вклучувањето на овие луѓе на некаков начин во незиниот развој. Остварувањето на ваквата идеја конечно видов преку моето учество во Македонија 2025. Тука запознав луѓе кои се докажани светски лидери а делат иста визија за економскиот развој на мојата држава. Токму затоа ова година решивме да го организираме овој самит во Охрид и да потенцираме заложбата на Македонија 2025 да отвори нови можности за економска соработка и инвестиции во Македонија. Резултатот на ангажманот на моите колеги од бордот на Македонија 2025 е присуството на овој самит на повеќе светски познати бизнис лидери. Ќе спомнам неколку. Првиот човек на Nokia Siemens ќе биде со нас овие неколку дена. Висок член на бордот на Raiffeisen банката, оснивачот на инвестицијскиот фонд СЕАФ и многу други. Дел од овој самит се и голем број на потенцијални инвеститори, кои ќе ги разгледаат можностите да ја стават Македонија на мапата на своите идни бизнис дестинации. Исто така и македонските компании го препознаа потенцијалот на овој настан во насока на остварување на контакти и ни се обратија со голем интерес и желба за организирање на меѓусебни средби со гостите од странство. Со нас тука се и успешни дистрибутери на производи од овој регион, кои имаат желба да го зголемат својот асортиман и доаѓаат со конкретна намера да се запознаат со македонските производни и извозни потенцијали. Освен тоа, присуството на членови на одборот на директори на Македонија 2025 е потврда за нивната заинтересираност, својата експертиза, контакти и знаења да ги стават на располагање на македонските бизнис лидери. Многубина од вас допатувавте не само од разни делови на земјава, туку од различни делови на светот, со што го покажавте вашиот интерес за присуство на овој собир. Меѓу нас денес се наоѓаат представници од повеќе од 30 земји, од скоро сите континенти. Наша цел беше да ја поставиме оваа платформа за соработка и убедени сме дека сите присутни ќе најдат корист од неа, како преку билатерални средби, така и преку уникатна можност на едно место да слушнат излагања од повеќе еминентни говорници од различни области. На крај би сакал да им се заблагодарам на сите наши партнери, спонзори, соработници, волонтери и сите останати кои се вклучија во подготовките на овој самит. Тука би сакал за на крај да ги споменам и некои од нашите подржувачи. Официјален телекомуникацијски партнер овој настан е T-Mobile. Платинумски спонзори се Alkaloid, Maxtil и Cosmic Development. Локален партнер за мали и средни предпријатија е Македонската развојна фондација за предпријатија. А во листата на останати подржувачи би ги вброил уште и винариите Стоби и Сковин, Добра вода, НЛБ Пензичкиот фонд, Карником, Кнауф, Мак Прогрес, Охридска банка и СЕАФ. Пред нас е два возбудливи дена и ве повикувам сите заедно да извлечеме максимум како од дискусиите и средбите кои ќе ги имаме, а така се надевам дека ќе успеете да видите нешто и од убавините на Охрид и нашата татковина Македонија. Сега дозволете ми да го представам господинот Мајк Зафировски, председател на одборот на директори на Македонија 2025.
Многу весел ви кажувам добродошле. I'll switch quickly to English, but it's such a pleasure and honor to welcome all of you here to Ohrid. This is one of my favorite places in the world. For the first 15 years of my life, we came here every summer, both Struga and Ohrid, so ton of great memories. So it's great to be here. I love the city not only for the atmosphere, but combination of tradition, religion, education, one of the really world's marvels on so many different areas. I also love the concept behind this summit. Zoran Martinovsky was the initial idea generator and driving force for this over the last 6 months, and all the board members played a very, very significant role getting us ready for what I think will be 2 very, very exciting and hard-working days for all of us. I think the goal for the summit is well summarized in the theme. As you can see in your brochures, discovering opportunities and leveraging business diaspora to promote trade, investments, and economic growth. As you know, the issues and goals we're discussing are not unique to Macedonia. Every single country in the world is discussing higher unemployment and faster growth. So this is not anything unique to our country. But at the same time, being a proud Macedonian, I'm hoping that we're going to see even a greater acceleration in those two aspects right here in Macedonia. Before getting into the details, let me again say thank you for coming here. I know people have come from all over the world, and I'll just take a chance to have all the people that are here from outside Macedonia, if you please stand up. What's more? All right. I love the diversity. It's supposed to be almost 30% of you came from all over the world. And also, obviously, many people from business, government, and academia from Macedonia. And a number of CEOs, investors, ambassadors. So again, really a pleasure and a great deal of pride to be here with this wonderful group. I want to say big thanks to the government, particularly Invest in Macedonia, the promoters, the ambassadors, who really went well above and beyond the call of duty to make this event a success. Particular kudos to one ambassador, Kire Ilioski. I mean, personally, he brought 11 potential investors from Sweden, so Kire, благодарам. Thank you very much. And again, as Zoran said, thank you to all the sponsors. Without you, we would not have this wonderful event, so thank you on behalf of Macedonia 2025 and all the citizens that really are looking forward to the outcome of this session. Now, I'm really hoping that this summit will become an annual event. And that's going to depend on us. What do we do the next 2 days and how we follow up after this session. There's a little thing called execution, and a difference between good organizations and not so good organizations. Whether business, not-for-profits, and government is all based on execution. And do we do what we say we're going to do? And personally, I have 2 goals for this conference. 2 personal goals. One, to get potential investors more knowledgeable and more excited about the investment opportunities here. And second, and frankly, just as important, to increase engagement and commitment from the business, government, educational professionals, and the diaspora in a process to really help move the country forward. The challenges are not easy, particularly not with a soft global economy, one even worse in Europe. But I do think there's a wonderful foundation which we have in place. And I'll just take a couple minutes to reflect what I think is the good foundation which we have in Macedonia based on 20 years of independence and some of the challenges facing us. One, I think we should be very proud of the peaceful transition to democracy over the last 20 years. That there's been aggressive implementation of rule of law and real efforts to curb corruption. The microeconomic stability, both micro and macro, actually are in pretty good shape. Not where we want to have them, but the discipline in spending, containing budget deficits is frankly among the best in the world. There's a dramatically improved business climate. The World Bank ranks Macedonia typically in the top third, I think the top 30 the last time the statistics came out. There's stable wages and inflation. So there's a pretty good platform to be building going forward. There's also some real advantages, whether you're a local business or a foreign investor. Cost of doing business in Macedonia is relatively competitive to many countries in Europe. We have a very great strategic location. Taxes are reasonable, actually among the lowest in the world. There are additional incentives for people that want to grow. And I would argue there's a very strong Macedonian work ethic. So again, 5 good pillars on the foundation, 5 good pillars for companies who want to do business here. At the same time, I don't think anyone is happy or satisfied with a number of challenges facing us. One, level of unemployment is a level that's not sustainable. It's too high. I would argue the size of the black economy is too large as well. Output from our universities. We do not have enough math, science, and IT graduates from our universities. Some business practices, despite improvement, remain a concern, including some concerns over continued corruption. FDI, foreign investment, has increased, but not at a level which we need to have. And competitiveness of local companies needs to improve. So those are not easy challenges to overcome, but they must be overcome if, in fact, we want to improve the quality of life in Macedonia. And actually, the challenge of creating Macedonia 2025 was to try to help build a stronger nation. 2025 was an aspirational goal. By that time, we're hoping to narrow the gap between the average European country and Macedonia. Aspirational, that's why we provided additional time. Again, it's a good platform, but I think that progress needs to accelerate. And let me just provide a little perspective why I became engaged in Macedonia, and goes back to 2002. As I was just been promoted president of Motorola. So as I was running between meetings, my secretary was chasing me and said, Mike, you have an important phone call for you. I said, well, take a message, I'm late for a meeting. She goes, no, the president of Macedonia wants to speak with you. I thought she was joking for a second. Then I called myself saying, well, what is his name? And there's President Trajkovski called to congratulate, says, Mike, we don't have that many Macedonians in the corporate world. I want to say on behalf of all the Macedonians, we're proud of you. And can you come and so we can have a discussion of what we can do together? So I came back soon afterwards with Motorola and USAID. We were able to help put a Wi-Fi across the country. But the moment of truth for me was I've been saying all these years, I'm a proud Macedonian. Then all of a sudden, I'm not even sure who the president of Macedonia was. And I said, it's easy to say things, it's much more difficult to actually put those actions into words. So it's 10 years ago, I said, I need to change that. If I'm proud Macedonian, I also remember a famous quote from John Kennedy, President of the United States, ask not what the country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Soon afterwards, in 2005, there was a Macedonian event in Toronto. President Trajkovski at that time was giving a talk to the diaspora, but John Bitov, after the presentation came, says, Mike, can you and my son try to provide some ideas as to what you may want to do to help the country of your birth? So that's how Macedonia 2025 started. And in many ways, I just want to clarify, there's no political alignment within Macedonia 2025. Our goals are simply to use our experiences and networks to help the country of our birth. Nothing expected in return, but just the pride, what we hope will become a much more prosperous Macedonia. The goals for the organization remain the same. Using economic development as a pillar of driving improvements, and the specific goals are to make Macedonia more attractive for foreign investment, to promote transparent government and corporate policies, to create a flourishing culture and environment for entrepreneurs, to help Macedonia become a regional gateway for businesses, and to promote diaspora and networking, and to strengthen the linkages on a global basis. I'm very proud of the progress which we've made in the last 12 months. A couple of points. We have a brand new office in Skopje, very active. We have 4 new directors, and all of them former or current CEOs. Andy Pekov is one of those CEOs, Vera Stavrov from Macedonia, and 2 great CEOs from Macedonia, Mincho Yordanov and Živko Mukaetov. So it's wonderful to get the can-do attitude that CEOs bring to the organization. Also, we completed a research project to help us prioritize where we should be directing our efforts. We started business forums in Toronto, Chicago, and New York, but this is by far the biggest and most significant business forum. We're also opening the organization for junior board members to provide networking to aspiring diaspora, but most of our activity is focused in Macedonia, driving educational programs and working with the government and businesses to drive the company forward. So as I said, this is the increased engagement, and I'm hoping this background, including my personal journey to get more involved in country, will stimulate thinking, particularly among the diaspora, to have you reflect what can you do to further advance the opportunities and the prospects for Macedonia. So what are we trying to accomplish in the next day and a half? And obviously I'm biased, but I think we have 6 fantastic panels. The combination of the content of the discussions, as well as the people that will be involved in those panels. And I really hope that time and money, which all of you have invested to come to Ohrid, will be very significant, both from tangible and intangible results. And if you benefit, by deduction, Macedonia will benefit as well. And I'll just take a minute or so to cover very quickly my perspective and the expectations from the 6 panels. The first one will be the global economic prospects and political outlook. Zoran Jolevski, a close friend, will be leading a panel which includes ambassadors to and from the United States, the former president of the UN Assembly, executives from the IMF, and a senior executive from Nokia Siemens. I mean, this is as impressive a panel as you can have, and they'll be discussing the current economy, the outlook, but also very specifically, Macedonia as an emerging country. The second panel, Doing Business in Macedonia, will be led by Vera Stavrov, again, a great CEO and entrepreneur, and she'll be discussing the panel, who are the most competitive sectors in the country, and the very, very, I'd say, lucrative and very encouraging and enticing investment opportunities for businesses to be investing in Macedonia. The panel is going to include the Minister of Economy, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and 3 gentlemen leading the ways to attract foreign investment into Macedonia. On several occasions, I have had a chance to actually visit investors, and I can tell you the story is very compelling, and it's most important if you're able to bring the investors into the country for them to see and feel the opportunity. The third panel, the investment climate in Macedonia, perspective from existing FDIs, people that actually have made the commitment to come to Macedonia. And this is really where rubber meets the road. Are the investors getting the returns, the promises they made when they made a commitment to come to Macedonia? And this panel will be led by Zoran Martinovski. We're going to have 7 very important investors. I've spoken to all of them in times past, and I know for a fact they are not only pleased with their investments, they've been very also eager to be great references to other prospective investors in the country. The fourth panel is financing investments and exports, from microfinancing to financing capital investments. And anyone that knows global economies and how businesses move from incubation to become successful companies knows that capital formation and capital investments are critically important. And here I'm very pleased that the panel, which will be moderated by Robert Archer, the vice chairman of the organization, will be discussing both the current available opportunities, but also there'll be a discussion of what will be coming down the road. Here I do want to provide my appreciation for Robert. Robert is the vice chairman of the organization, and I would argue there's been no one more involved and given more in the last 12 months, myself including, to the organization. And again, Robert will be discussing both the opportunities, and I'm very pleased to say that later this afternoon, you'll see a press release, or SEAF, a very, very renowned organization providing financing opportunities to entrepreneurs in emerging markets. We have worked very closely with SEAF, and we'll be announcing a new fund prioritized on businesses in Macedonia to provide a combination of venture capital, private equity, and mezzanine financing. And what's unique about this one is that actually diaspora will be the lead investors. A number of us, myself and John Bitoff, have given commitment to Bert that we will be the investors, and people have asked us, are you prepared to be making investments in the country? Some of us are not professional investors, so we're working very closely with a very renowned organization to be able to, again, put our mouth where our words have been. And last, and certainly the very exciting panel, as you can see, I'm very excited to be here today. The energy hopefully is flowing through this presentation this morning, is leveraging diaspora to create economic opportunities. I mean, as you may know, there's probably as many Macedonians outside the country as we have in Macedonia. My good friend Mitri Kutanovsky will be leading a great panel, which has a combination of diaspora, the mission director for U.S. in Macedonia, a globally renowned professor, and they'll be discussing, can we create a sustainable vision to get diaspora involved, not only coming here on vacation, not only sending a check for Christmas, to much more actively involved. And this is a very important group. And by seeing how many of you here actually travel all over the world to come here, gives me the confidence that we're on the right path and we can expect great things from us. So what do you think? Does this sound like a very appropriate agenda? Yeah, I'm seeing nods. I, for one, am set here to listen, to take notes, to ask questions, to challenge new positions, to make commitments, to make new friends, to form new relationships. In a world, I'll be very engaged. And the level of your engagement and the commitments and the challenges, and hopefully for you to raise your expectations from yourself, is going to go a long way of how successful we're going to be for not only for the next couple of days, but for the week, months, and years ahead. Let's have a great conference. I'll be here at every session through Sunday morning. I hope to meet all of you, and we'll be very eager to hear both your suggestions, but also to hear your commitments as well. Now, it gives me a great pleasure, before we start the panel, to introduce what I believe is a great friend to business, someone that's really put everything to make Macedonia an economic development a priority, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Macedonia, Nikola Gruevski.
Vaše ekscelenции, почитувани министри во владата на Република Македонија, почитувани представници на Македонија 2025, ценети бизнисмени од земјата и од странство, дами и господа. Навистина сум почестен што говорам пред овој аудиториум на глобалниот инвестицијски самит во Република Македонија. Ова е една од ретките прилики во кои бизнис елитата, македонската диаспора, странските дипломати и македонскиот политички врв отворено разговараат за идните контури на македонската економија и за начините за зајакнување на нејзината конкурентност, како и за можностите за правење бизнис. Со своето силно присуство денес, но и со сите останати преходни наши одвоени или заеднички средби, владата покажува дека диалогот со бизнис заедницата е исклучително важна платформа и наша стратешка определба, врз која ќе надградува економската стратегија и ќе продолжи да дизајнира политики, кои се пријателски насочени кон приватниот сектор. Заедничките цели, кои ги поставуваме за овозможување на услови за економски раст и развој, надминување од влијанијата на глобалните предизвици, политиките за подобрување и одбрана на стандардот на граѓаните, интенцијата за создавање на нови работни места и вработување на луѓето бараат заеднички ангажман и заеднички напор за остварување на поставените нивоа. На крајот на денот, иако сите имаме различни парцијални цели, владата да создаде подобар амбиент за граѓаните, бизнисот да оствари профит, работникот плата, сепак сите ние имаме една заедничка цел, а тоа е да работиме за успех и во функција на нашата татковина Република Македонија. Патот кон успехот е резултат на правилен избор на одлуки, одговорен пристап и политики базирани исклучиво на вредностите и принципите. Владата во изминатиот период презеде суштински реформи на бизнис климата во Република Македонија, со кои покажавме дека идеите и ветувањата ги преточуваме во дела, и тоа токму водејќи се од вредностите, од дадениот збор и обврската, да се исполнат дадените ветувања. Од неуморната и посветена работа на секој поединец и од постојниот контакт и соработка со бизнис заедницата која се должи на взаемно почитување, усогласување, аргументирање и креирање. Имено, воведовме најниски даноци во Европа, преку воведување на рамен данок од 10%, данок на добивка и 10% персонален данок на доход, како и преку намалување на ДДВ-то од 18 на 5% на низа производи и услуги. Следуваше и ослободување од плаќањето данок на добивка на малите и микро предпријатија со годишен приход до 3 милиони денари, како и можност за избор на модел за одоночување на оние кои имаат од 3 до 6 милиони денари приход остварен во дадената година. Спроведовме и реформи кои ги поедноставуваат и олеснуваат процедурите за плаќање данок. Секоја година вршиме намалување на царините за увоз на суровини и на репроматеријали кои не се произведуваат во Македонија. Воведовме едношалтерски систем, ексим, во царината за добивање на дозволи, во соработка со стопанските комори и директно со фирмите спроведуваме, а деломно се уште ги спроведуваме 4 фази на проектот Регулаторна гилотина, со кој проект сменивме стотина законски прописи и околу 600 подзаконски акти со цел намалување на административните бариери во водењето бизнис. Со тоа драстично намаливме бюрократијата во Република Македонија. Воведовме и бруто плата и интегрирана наплата на придонесите, како и намалување на хармонизација на најниската основица за плаќање на социјалните придонеси од 65 на 50% од просечната плата. Стапките на социјалните придонеси кон фондот за здравство, за пензиско и така натаму се намалија од 32% на 26,5%, а ако дозволат условите во 2014 година планираме повторно намалување. Со овие чекори драстично ги намаливме трошоците за правење бизнис во Македонија. И Македонија стана држава со најниски трошоци за правење бизнис, споредено со било која друга држава во Европа, на континентот Европа. Намалувањето на даночното оптоварување и снижувањето на социјалните придонеси на почетокот беа оценети како ризичен потек, со сериозни последици за стабилноста на јавните финанси. И најголемите тогашни скептици денес се уверија дека тоа беше вистински чекор. Вистински чекор на развојна траекторија на македонската економија. Заеднички со вас успеавме да ги зачуваме производството и вработеноста во услови на исклучително неповолно економско обкружување во Европа. Додека некои други земји во регионот со голем дел од капацитетите потлекнуваа пред економската криза. Ние продолживме со реформскиот курс, со посилно темпо. Иако и на нас глобалните неповолности и предизвици имаат сериозен ефект и негативно влијание. Ние со нашата конзистентност, упорност, почитувајќи ги вредностите, не дозволивме да имаме масовни отпуштања од работа, не дозволивме даноците да се покачуваат, ниту пак да се намалуваат платите и пензиите, како и државните субвенции и стимулации за граѓаните и за компаниите. Големо влијание во постигнувањето на овие резултати имаше и фактор што воведовме 4 пакети на антикризни мерки и поединечно уште поголем број на мерки. Преку нив овозможивме како никаде во Европа добивката, данокот на добивка, да се одданочува само ако е распределен во дивиденда. Што значи данокот на добивка за оние компании кои нема да го распределат во дивиденда, кои што ќе го зачуваат, добивката, ќе ја зголемат капитализацијата на компанијата или пак ќе реинвестираат. За нив данокот на добивка е 0. Воведовме мирување на врските по основ на придонеси за здравствено осигурување, ослободување од научување камати и редица други мерки кои што помогнаа за време на тешкиот кризен период. Во насока на поттикнување на стопанскиот раст, го намаливме на доместокот за приватизација на градежното земјиште кај правните лица, воведовме кредитна линија кај Македонската банка за поддршка на развојот за мали, микро и средни предпријатија, воспоставивме фонд на земјоделско земјиште за продолживање, наменет за невработени лица, ја докапитализиравме Македонската банка за поддршка на развојот и овозможивме за одредени намени да се дава директно кредитирање, воведовме специјални програми за вработување и самовработување на илјадници лица, преземавме мерки со кои што ги зголемивме јавните инвестиции и започнавме многу инфраструктурни проекти, мерки за олеснување на извозот на стоки, усвоивме пакет на мерки за металуршката индустрија, силно го поддржавме градежниот сектор, за одбележување се разбира и заложбите, да не се дозволи рапидно зголемување на долгот и да обстанеме како држава со една од најмалите долгови во Европа. Во моментов Македонија е 4-та најмалку задолжена држава во Европа, со околу 30% од GDP државен долг. Тоа беа само мал дел од мерките кои што ги преземавме со цел да се помине низ овој тежок период на најпрви светска економска криза, а подосна европска должничка криза која што се уште има влијание во Македонија. Односно се уште трае и нормално има влијание во Македонија. И додека многу влади се правдаа со глобалниот пад на странските инвестиции и со деловниот песимизам, користејќи го како алиби ресурсно и кадрно да престанат со своите активности за барање на нов и свеж капитал, ние како влада продолживме со силна промоција на можностите за правење бизнис во Македонија. Користејќи ги сите можности кои се создадени од нас и кои што се на наше располагање. Водејќи се од оваа максима, не се обесхрабривме и продолживме на секоја страна од светот да бараме нови потенцијални потребни за нашата економија, за капитал и можности за нови работни места. И на тој пат слушнавме и доста критики, и сугестии, и идеи, кои денеска со доаѓањето на инвеститорите и отварањето на нови погони и нови работни места, како, например, вчера, американскиот Kemet Electronics, тие само бледнеат во дневно-политичкиот контекст. Македонија се повеќе почна да се гледа како привлечна инвестициска дестинација, како важна порта кон Европа на мултинационални компании, чии ефекти веќе се чувствуваат пред се низ големувањето на понудата на нови работни места и значително учество во увозот на производите на овие компании. А позитивниот ефект се очекува и понатаму да ја зголемува својата димензија и по обем и по квалификации. И покрај силниот притисок врз јавните финансии продолжуваме со реформите за подобрување на бизнис климата и вложуваме максимални напори за брзо закрупнување на македонското стопанство. Почитувани присутни, како главни приоритети на Македонија на економски план остануваат забрзувањето на процесот на интеграција во Европската унија и НАТО, обезбедувањето на силна поддршка за зајакнување на деловниот сектор и изградбата на конкурентна економија. Овие заеднички цели се остваруваат преку инвестирање во квалитетно образование, зајакнување на менаџерските и предприемачките способности, силна деловна етика и солидно корпоративно управување кои се клучни за успехот на европскиот и глобалниот пазар. Владата на Македонија силно верува дека поголемата изложеност кон глобализацијата е важен дел од таа стратегија. Ќе продолжиме со нашите напори за привлекување на инвеститори и секоја ваша помош, поддршка и идеја ќе ни биде добредојдена. Тие, освен што вложуваат свој капитал, пренесуваат и своји знаења, прават технолошки прелевања, ги зголемуваат економските потенцијали на земјата, отвораат нови работни места. Истовремено и паралелно ја зајакнуваме и нашата економска дипломатија, за да укажеме на резултатите од реформите и на атрактивната бизнис клима во Македонија. Поголемата изложеност кон глобализацијата подразбира и квалитетна и едуцирана работна сила, која ќе се справува со конкурентните притисоци. Затоа владата ќе продолжи да го одржува високото ниво на буџетски алокации за образованието, ќе обезбедува континуирана подршка за образовните профили, за кои постои поголема побарувачка на работна сила и ќе го вложи својот максимум за да го подигне квалитетот на образованието. Почитувани пријатели, денеска Македонија во светот е позната по тоа што е и држава која што има договори за слободна трговија со сите земји во Европа. Тоа возможува поранешниот хендикеп на мал пазар да се надмине, затоа што секој кој што инвестира во Македонија, кој што има бизнис и производство, својот извоз може да го прави без плаќање на царини или било какви додатни оптеретувања, затоа што производот произведен во Македонија практично има ист третман како да е произведен во било која земја во Европа, во било која земја на континентот Европа. Исто така, значајна предност, како што пред малку кажав, е тоа што создадовме држава со најниски трошоци во Европа, вклучувајќи најниски даноци, но и други трошоци кои што се составен дел од еден бизнис. Тоа особено е важно за оние компании кои што сакаат да произведуваат во Македонија, да продаваат глобално, да ја покријат Европа или да покријат неколку континенти, и се повеќе од нив, како што знаете, го прават тоа. Дополнително, слободните економски зони се дополнителна атрактивност за компаниите, затоа што во нив, како што знаете, во првите 10 години има специјални бенефиции за инвеститорите, целосно ослободување од плаќање на данок на добивка и персонален данок на доход, како и ослободување од царина за увоз на репроматеријали и ДДВ исто така за увоз на репроматеријали. Има и други дополнителни бенефиции, како што е символичната цена на земјиштето и давањето можност за сите приклучоци на инфраструктура, во некој од нив, во Скопје, например, вклучувајќи и присуство на газ. Така што, овие работи се едни од поатрактивните кои што се значени за инвеститорите, а исто така и стабилната макроекономска политика е една од важните работи кои што, особено во денешно време, на европска должничка криза и многу проблеми во светската економија, на макроекономски план, се значајна информација за секој потенцијален инвеститор. Ние како влада ќе продолжиме со одржување на здрави економски политики и спроведување на понатамошни реформи. Тие политики подразбираат и понатамошно одржување на ниски стапки на даноци и на придонеси, зашто владата се обврза дека нема да зголеми ниту еден данок во Република Македонија, продолжување со структурни реформи за подобрување на бизнис климата и конкурентноста на економијата. Како што знаете, Македонија пред 6 години беше рангирана од страна на Светската банка според условите за правење бизнис на 96-то место. После 6 години Македонија е рангирана на 22-то место во светот, пред 19 земји членки на Европската унија и се разбира пред сите земји од Источна и Централна Европа. Ние ќе продолжиме со многу реформи за подобрување на бизнис климата, за да ја подобриме и ова 22-та позиција, која што моментално имаме на ранг листата на Светската банка во годишното издание Doing Business. Понатаму ќе продолжиме да работиме и на обезбедување поволни кредитни линии за малите и за средни предпријатија од Европската инвестициона банка со повластена каматна стапка, продолжување со засилен интензитет на изградба на крупните инфраструктурни проекти, како што се доизградба на автопатот Александар Македонски, коридорот 10, изградба на националната гасоводна мрежа, кој што треба да стартува во 2013 година, изградба на пругата кон Бугарија, која што ќе се изведува помеѓу 2013 и ќе се доврши до 2019 година, како и пругата кон Албанија, чии што подготовки во делот на проектирањето веќе започна и која што е дел од проектите со ИПА компонента, како и реконструкцијата на пругата на коридорот 10 со цел да биде побрза и поефикасна, изградба на повеќе хидроцентрали и други енергетски проекти. Во нашите цели остануваат и одржување на нивото на приватната потрошувачка преку постепен пораст на платите и пензиите согласно можностите на буџетот и општите економски состојби во земјата, како и продолжување на политиката на низок буџетски дефицит и ниско ниво на задолженост на земјата. Почитувани, овој самит е пример за синергија со бизнисот и создавање на заеднички политики, кои се дел од пошироката развојна стратегија за македонската економија. Ве уверувам дека владата на Македонија, како и досега, секогаш ќе ја слушне визијата на приватниот сектор, како силен партнер во реализација на добрите идеи. Сите ние се трудиме, секој во својот домен, да помогне за развојот и изградбата на Република Македонија, со силна, модерна и напредна држава. Во духот на оваа порака, ја изразувам својата увереност дека ние имаме можности, знаења, вештини, но и верба и енергија и многу вредности со кои можеме да придонесеме за нашата татковина. Од тука, поддршката не само на домашните бизнисмени, туку и на странските бизнисмени кои што се заинтересирани за Македонија и особено на македонската диаспора и на поуспешните луѓе од македонската диаспора секако ќе биде значајна. Ви посакувам успешна работа и ви благодарам за вниманието.
Since this is the first panel, I would like to share with you how we are planning to organize the panel discussions. Actually, each panel will be about 1.5 hours, and the idea is we have in each panel distinguished keynote speaker and distinguished panelists, and they will use half of the time, and the other half of the time, 45 minutes, will be time for questions and answers and comments on what we are going to discuss during that panel. The title of the first panel is Economic Situation and Prospects in the World, and we will set the stage for the future discussion. And I would like to use this opportunity to invite the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Zoran Stavreski, to address you. Mr. Stavreski used to be high-level official of the World Bank, and also he was chairman of the annual board meeting of World Bank and IMF. Mr. Stavreski, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Zoran. Почитуван премиер, почитувани дами и господа, dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like first to thank Macedonia 2025 for the invitation to participate and the opportunity to address you today on the current economic developments and perspectives of Macedonia, the region, and Europe. Today, in conditions of high level of indebtedness of many governments in the world, economists are facing the challenge to find an answer for the functioning of the global economy. The economic crisis is at the same time crisis of the economic science, since both theory and models have failed in explaining the current economic reality and have shown us that no economic laws can remain unchallenged. In such reality, what is of crucial importance is the readiness of governments to undertake measures and policies corresponding to the specific needs of their economies. It is clear that the world economy is still in crisis. Following low growth of 1.5% in 2011, 15 states in Europe at the end of the second quarter of this year experienced GDP decline, including a large number of most developed countries. What is worrying is that the main driving force of the European economy, Germany, registered slowdown of the economic activity, realizing only 0.5% growth in the second quarter. With China, Brazil, and India facing slower growth and anemic growth of the United States, of the US economy, it is obvious that the risks are growing stronger and indicators of economic activity and unemployment in particular have no clear prospects for short-term improvement. During the past decade, Southeast Europe has undergone a dramatic transformation. The extent of the progress in the development has been unprecedented in the region's modern history. However, the world and in particular Eurozone crisis led to activity decline in the economies in the region and inevitably affect the trends in our economy as well. The past 4 years of crisis have brought out clearly the extent to which Southeast Europe, and in this region Macedonia, is part of the global economy. While this integration process has brought enormous benefits to the region, the downside is that crises that originate elsewhere will affect the region no matter what actions are taken to mitigate this. In the case of Southeast Europe, the fall in the output has numerous causes. I will focus on 3 main channels. First is the external demand from the main export markets, which has dropped sharply. Second is the access to finance, which became much more difficult or expensive. And the third is the volume of remittances. Before the crisis, most countries in this region had exports growing at around 30% year on year. However, after September 2008, demand from abroad dried up and export collapsed to a level where year-on-year growth was negative. There were some signs of stabilization, however, in 2010 and 11, with solid double-digit export growth in Macedonia. However, 2012 brought again reduced demand from the trade partners in the European Union. In order to get a better understanding of why exports have dropped, of course it is important to know what countries are exporting and where the exports are going to. How Macedonia did with respect of this channel overall? Relatively good. Contrary to others in the region, the share of our export to EU actually increased to 62% this year compared to 56% in 2009. However, this requires further analysis in order to understand the reasons. If we analyze the structure, it can be concluded that the performance is mostly due to the export by Johnson Matthey and Johnson Controls, companies which reached their full capacity in the last 2 years. If export of catalysts is included and other components, the share of export to EU would actually be lower by around 5 percentage points in 2012 compared to the period before the crisis, pointing out to a reduced external demand for other Macedonian products. However, the fact that Republic of Macedonia managed to keep its export share to EU countries at a relatively stable position is most probably the clearest argument for the success of our policies in attracting foreign direct investments, and the first lesson learned about methods of fighting the crisis. Let me now turn to the second channel of contagion, credit growth. Banks and other financial institutions have been major drivers of economic growth in the past decade, but also of rising vulnerabilities. Virtually all countries in the region have had 4 or more years in a row of a credit boom, defined as annual growth in total credit to the economy by more than 2 percentage points of GDP. The crisis has contributed to a dramatic slowdown in the credit growth. Annual rates in EU are at the lowest level compared in the last 15 years, with zero growth of credits in the Eurozone in the second quarter. In most countries, year-on-year credit growth is in low single-digit levels in Southeast Europe, and some have negative credit growth. Reduced lending to companies and households further contributed to the reduced domestic demand. How has Macedonia fared with respect of this channel? Again, somewhat better than others, due to 2 major differences. 250 million euros have been provided for the economy, which were borrowed by the government from the European Investment Bank and channeled to SMEs under subsidized terms. This enabled us to have credit growth at around 7% this year. And second, better deposit-to-loan ratio compared to other countries, which required smaller adjustment by Macedonian banks during the crisis. Banks remained stable and well capitalized. Lastly, the third channel has affected remittances. These have fallen in most of the countries in Southeast Europe. However, Macedonia, together with some of the Southeastern European countries, has performed rather well. Remittances remained high and stable during the crisis years, which provided another cushion for domestic demand in this challenging period. Let me now turn to perspectives of the region, Macedonia and Europe. Following the relatively sound recovery from the recession and the end of 2011 and the first half of 2012 were not positive. Such developments in Europe have also caused Macedonian economy to decline by 1.1% in the first half of this year. Despite the consent for Greece bailout and putting in place European stability mechanism, as well as the readiness of the ECB to buy bonds of governments asking for help, that is despite the political progress and the measures undertaken, GDP in the Eurozone is expected to drop by 0.4% this year, with a low growth of 0.2% in 2013. Therefore, the Eurozone crisis is becoming the main risk to the global financial system, and also due to the private capital outflow from the peripheral to the central states. There is high probability that this crisis will have an adverse effect on the economic activity in the southeastern European countries through slowdown of export, which was the main factor of recovery in the period 2010 and 2011. In addition, the ongoing fiscal consolidation in most of the countries, worsening of the conditions of their labor markets, and negative effects of the foreign-owned banks in some cases is creating additional challenges and risks. One thing is certain, the period of easy and high growth will not return or will not return soon in this period, in this region. Countries should be rather focused on intra-regional trade, since only 23% of the total trade in the region is between southeastern European countries. Coordination of trade and other policies will further contribute to increasing and strengthening of the markets in the region. Sustainable economic recovery will also depend on growth of productivity and innovation, as well as growth of exports. These weaknesses of the European economy will also affect export and import of Macedonian economy in the coming period. What is positive is there is no imbalance in our economy as in some other countries, such as too high budget deficit or public debt, high current account deficit or other bubbles. Macedonia, with relatively low budget deficit of 2.5% and public debt of around 29.8%, compares better than all other countries in the region and has a better fiscal position. This helps us to reduce, but not to avoid, the effects of the European crisis. Driven by the expectations for the economic trends in Europe, we expect Macedonian economy to achieve somewhat better performance than the average of European countries, with GDP growth of 2% for 2013. While this is somewhat better than other countries in the region, it is still much lower than the potential growth rate of the economy. Looking forward, in medium term, we expect, however, better perspective for Macedonian and the overall economy. What is important for all of us is how Macedonia will position itself for the period after the crisis, it is for the period from 2014 and on. This requires a number of policies to be implemented and to continue to be implemented actually in our case. First, we need to continue with disciplined fiscal policy, which is going to reach the appropriate balance between short-term objective of supporting growth by intensifying, in particular, capital investments, and medium to long-term objective of the fiscal policy to keep public debt at sustainable level. With government debt of 29.8%, Macedonia is the fourth least indebted country in Europe, with convincingly lowest debt level compared to all countries in the region. The fact is that a large number of countries in the region and Europe increased taxes, and the government of Macedonia is respecting its commitment to maintain low rates of taxes and social contributions, as well as to uphold the promise given to the businessmen that our government will not increase the taxes, and it certainly will not increase them in the challenging period of crisis. This is tough, but as we proved, not impossible mission. Third, despite the fiscal challenges, capital expenditures need to be maintained at a high level. Investment in infrastructure is important, both on short run, as these investments provide engagement of the construction sector and some related industries in the otherwise hostile environment. This proved to be key for preserving many jobs in Macedonia during the crisis. However, improvements in infrastructure are even more important for the long-term competitiveness of the economy. For this reason, the construction of the highways along the Corridor 10, the national gas pipeline network, railroad tracks to Bulgaria and Albania, and reconstruction of railroad tracks along Corridor 10, and the number of investments in the energy sector, all of these mentioned also by the Prime Minister, remain a top priority projects for the next years for the Republic of Macedonia. Fourth, however, the private sector is the main driving force of economic growth. And on the long run, our growth model needs to be based on innovations rather than on capital investments. We need more Johnson Control, Johnson Matthey, Chemets, and similar companies. We need more export of catalysts, capacitors, and other high value-added products. To achieve this, the government needs to continue with constant improvement of the business environment. This is a process, not a measure. It is important both for attracting more FDI, but also for Macedonian companies, the existing enterprises, to invest more. Therefore, stimulating investment in new products, increase of the competitiveness through innovation, research and marketing, and capturing new markets are our priorities and also challenges at the same time. The reforms for improving the business climate have brought results. Today, Macedonia is ranked among top 25 destinations in the world, according to Doing Business report of the World Bank and IFC. Many investors have paid attention to this fact and have put Macedonia on their radar due to this fact, accompanied with some others, such as macroeconomic stability, most attractive tax package in Europe, free access to EU markets by signing free trade agreements with all EU countries and others, and political stability confirmed with EU candidacy status and prospects for EU and NATO membership. However, it is necessary for us to continue to work in order to increase the level of domestic and foreign investment, as mentioned by Mike previously. In tight credit conditions, the government provided cheap credit lines in total amount of 250 million euros at favorable interest rate. Given the fact that easy access to cheap financial resources is crucial for small and medium companies in particular, the government should continue providing additional funds channeled to small and medium enterprises. Fast disbursement of these funds by the companies will enable some of them to grow and others to survive in the current environment. Investment in education remains our priority, in particular in IT and technical skills. Providing official social safety net is also particularly important. Adequate protection of the most vulnerable groups is important during the crisis, not only for the sake of preserving social stability, but also for maintaining appropriate environment for continuation of reforms. As you can see, the challenges are numerous and we have to cope with all of them. Today, as a government, we are obliged to take care about the citizens and the businesses, but at the same time, we are responsible for future generations. Thus, all projects and policies are implemented and should be implemented from a fiscally sustainable position with moderate level of budget deficits, not leading to increase of public debt above the long-term sustainable level. We will all agree that our economy and the region feels the consequences of the crisis in the Eurozone, and the long-term outlook of Macedonia lies in attracting foreign investors and providing favorable business conditions for domestic companies. It is necessary to increase export of products and services of Macedonian enterprises, for which new partners are necessary to enlarge the businesses both in the region and worldwide. I believe this summit is a real event to create a platform at which the business companies from Macedonia and the diaspora have possibility to meet each other, exchange the ideas, and work on joint projects. A platform that will bring Macedonians closer to Macedonia and Macedonia closer to the world. Thank you.
The topic of the first panel, as I mentioned, is economic prospects and political outlook. We are living in a very challenging time. Decision makers on a political level, politicians, the business leaders, the academia, all of them are facing challenges in creating strategies, how the countries, the companies should go out of that crisis and become stronger after the crisis is over. The challenge time is also opportunities for the nations. And we hope that this summit will help us to get out of Macedonia, to get out from this crisis as stronger, and we'll seize the opportunities what are in front of us. We have a distinguished panel of speakers from the political and business community, and they will share their views with you. First, I would like to invite Dr. Srdjan Kerim, with a distinguished career in politics, the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, also a former foreign minister and ambassador, academic as well as a businessman. He was leading one of the investments in Macedonia. Dr. Kerim, the floor is yours.
As my distinguished friend and colleague, Ambassador Jurevski, already mentioned, the task of this panel is to discuss global economic prospects and political outlook. Bearing this in mind, I would like to share with you a few thoughts on three specific issues. First one is related with the state of affairs of the global economy. The second one, some judgments on the immediate economic environment of the Republic of Macedonia, which is the Eurozone, for obvious reasons. And the third one, referring to the mission of our summit here in Ohrid, and especially the link of the diaspora and the government of the Republic of Macedonia. As a short introduction, I would like to say something. What do meteorologists and economists have in common? They both are obviously engaged in a forecasting exercise. The result in both cases is the same. They mainly fail in their forecasts for the benefit of the people. In recent times, meteorologists have made a tremendous progress in their forecast activities due to the engagements of satellites. The poor economists don't have this chance. They have to rely on their knowledge and intuition. And this is exactly the reason why I'm personally not inclined to engage myself in economic forecasts of any type. Allow me to quote George Friedman, the founder and CEO of Stratfor, who once said the following, and I quote, "The key to understanding economics is accepting that there are always unintended consequences. Actions people take for their own good reasons have results they don't envision or intend." End of quote. I emphasize this point of view of Friedman because it is determined through the fact that it has been expressed within the context of a forecast of the 21st century, namely the subtitle of Friedman's bestseller is The Next 100 Years. Deputy Prime Minister Stavrevski mentioned the IMF and their assessment about the global economy and about our own country, and I would like, along these lines, to mention also some important data which we have learned through the IMF, and that is that the world economy faces an across-the-board slowdown. Whereas in 2010, the global economic growth reached 5.1%, this and next year it will expand at a rate of only 3.5%. In the attempt to explain the background of this recession, Kenneth Rogoff, one of the most eminent economists worldwide, says the following, and I quote him, "The deep, prolonged decline and the slow, halting recovery is inevitable after a major systemic financial crisis." End of quote. It's a very accurate and to-the-point analysis indeed. My next point is related with the Eurozone and the European Union, which is, as I already mentioned, our next economic environment, and our economy is completely related and linked with it, not at least our currency with the euro. The Eurozone has already taken some decisive steps to complete its economic and monetary union. It decided at the EU summit in June this year to implement a banking union jointly supervised and regulated with the authority to shut failed banks and to provide region-wide deposit insurance to prevent bank runs. The key question, however, is how to restore economic growth. Restoring growth will require at least 3 major steps. First, in addition to controlling deficits, the borrowing countries must adopt convincing structural reforms. This means especially to increase the flexibility of their labor markets. Second, the strong economies in the northern half of Europe, especially Germany, must stop focusing on deficit reduction for a while and generate more spending and inflation. In other words, to buy more goods and services from their over-indebted countries rather than their debts. Finally, the Eurozone needs to continue working on a continent-wide stimulus program. This means that the European Central Bank should stimulate the economy through quantitative easing, and European countries should jointly issue the so-called project bonds aimed at boosting spending on infrastructure. In this context, allow me to quote again a very distinguished authority in the world, that's Fred Bergsten, one of the most prominent experts in the United States on international economics. He says, and I quote, "If the history of the continent's integration, meaning Europe, is any guide, Europe will emerge from its current turmoil not only with the euro intact, but also with stronger institutions and far better economic prospects for the future." End of quote. Why is this important for us? Because, as the Prime Minister underlined today, and he does that regularly, our future is there. We have to become, sooner or later, part of this Eurozone and the European Union. My final point is related to, as I already said, our gathering here. I am personally very supportive of the efforts of Macedonia 2025, which is aimed to establish a sound link between the diaspora and the economic policy and the investment strategy of the Macedonian government. That's what matters. This is why we have to be all engaged, fully engaged. At the same time, I would like to point out, looking to the past, that the lack of investments of the diaspora in the last 20 years was mainly a consequence of lack of trust in economic conditions and the business environment in Macedonia. This is exactly the reason why our government changed things completely, reached out not only towards the diaspora, but towards all continents. One of the top domestic priorities, in my mind, in order to support this strategy, is to establish strong, stable, and reliable local business partners, and I underline that, strong, stable, and reliable local business partners, which will be engaged in joint ventures with the foreign investors. Prime Minister Gruevski underlined this only very recently in his address to the Macedonian business community, and one cannot agree more. I'm deeply convinced such a step is indispensable and will certainly serve the purposes of the roadshows across the globe recently undertaken by the Prime Minister and the government of Macedonia. We have to stop thinking and believing of the illusion that the world knows about Macedonia and people hardly await to come and to do something in Macedonia. What the government does is exactly the right, realistic, finally we have a realistic view on ourselves and the world. We reach out to the world, we go there, we talk to the people and we explain all the comparative advantages which this country has, and it obviously has. We have heard a lot of it today. I don't want to repeat. I would like only to support it. Let me finish with a short conclusion. Provided we can accomplish this goal, I'm convinced the forecasts of the economic growth and development of Macedonia until 2025 will be accurate and positive. We will not fail. And I guess that's what we all want together. Thank you very much for your attention.
It's a great pleasure for me to be here today, and before I say anything else, I'd like to thank the people of Macedonia 2025 for all their work in putting this event together. I'm sure Zoran and all those people have been very, very busy. This is early on, this is our first panel, but I can already tell this is going to be a great event, and I want to thank you for that, and I'm very happy to be able to participate today. I'm happy to be here for a couple of reasons. First of all, I'm always happy to come to Ohrid, which is one of my favorite places in the world. But secondly, I'm happy because I think all of us here today have a common goal, and that common goal is to expand and develop the Macedonian economy. And I think it's very important when people with a common goal and with common values get together so they can work out a agreed pathway and a common pathway to success. And I think through the panels here, and I think through just the networking and the corridors and talking over coffee, it's a good opportunity for all of us to learn more about what everybody else is doing and to make new contacts and to be able to work together to reach our goal, which is, as I said, an expanded Macedonian economy. This panel's conversation, this first panel, is focused on, as we've already heard, the global economic and political outlook, and also on Macedonia as an emerging economy. And I'm going to focus mostly on that latter point. With regard to Macedonia's political and economic future, the U.S. government, the government of Macedonia, and the investor community, as I've said, I believe all share the same goals. We all want Macedonia to integrate fully into the Euro-Atlantic community. We all want to see Macedonia's economy grow and develop. And given that agreement, I believe that the pathway forward, from my perspective, is pretty clear. And in fact, Macedonia already is on that pathway to expand its economy and to join the Euro-Atlantic community. There are obviously significant economic and political challenges to overcome. We've heard some of those already, but the trend is unmistakable. And I think it's the correct trend and we're on the correct path. As Macedonia works to achieve those goals, I'm proud to say that they have no better partner than us in the United States. Both the U.S. government officially and the U.S. private sector continue to assist Macedonia along the path that leads to Euro-Atlantic integration, as I've already mentioned. Many of you may know this, but it never hurts from my perspective as an ambassador to remind you that in the last 20 years, the United States has provided Macedonia with over $1 billion worth of assistance. That's American taxpayers' money. And some of the most recent examples are our USAID projects to assist Macedonian food producers, efforts to develop a plastic recycling sector, our work to assist Macedonia in finding realistic long-term solutions to energy issues. We've supported Macedonia's growing IT and digital media sector. We've promoted the use of information technology as a means of enhancing transparency and efficiency in the provision of government services. Just one example is a project called eGov, which some of you may actually know about, where we've facilitated government interaction with business and citizens by working with the government to develop and implement applications like e-tax and e-procurement, and also an automated import-export licensing system. And through USAID, we also are supporting entrepreneurship, a new venture creation here in Macedonia to address the unemployment challenge. We have economic growth programs that support new business startups, conduct business plan competitions, provide access to finance, encourage internships, and offer training and mentoring and technical assistance to small enterprises with growth and job creation potential, because as we all know, SMEs are really the driving force of an economy. But in addition to all that, American companies, private American companies, large and small, are choosing to do business here in Macedonia. Within the past month, 3 American businesses, some large, some very small, but all new to Macedonia, have commenced operations here in Skopje. We've already heard about Kemet, a world-class electronics manufacturer that established a factory in the Skopje Free Trade Zone. I was there just yesterday at the ribbon cutting, along with the Prime Minister and a number of the people out here today. This factory represents a $20 million investment by American entrepreneurs and will create 300 new jobs in Macedonia, with the potential and promise of more to come after that. A second one, a little bit smaller but a little more tasty, is Domino's, one of the most famous pizza chains in the United States. It's just opened 2 restaurants in Skopje. They won't provide a lot of employment, but that's, 20, 30 jobs, and that's 20 or 30 employed people. And finally, last, also tasty in my view, in the Stara Chadashia, an American baker and entrepreneur has just opened K8, which is a small American-style coffee shop and bakery. Again, not very big, but they're probably providing 5 new jobs, and just an example of American entrepreneurship. Now, there are many more examples of U.S. firms investing in Macedonia, but I just wanted to highlight these because they've all happened within the past few weeks. And they show, I think, the large range of businesses that see opportunities to get going here in Macedonia. Now, I also find it encouraging that the economic relationship between Macedonia and the United States is not a one-way street. The U.S., of course, welcomes investments from Macedonia. And as Macedonian companies grow and mature, I think they'll increasingly be looking to sell to and invest in the U.S. market and other foreign countries. I hope and expect that Macedonian companies will see the U.S. as an attractive market and investment destination. This is already happening to some extent. Alkaloid, Vitalia, Vitaminka, and other Macedonian firms are all exporting to the United States. And much to my delight, the superb wines of Macedonia are increasingly making inroads in what is a very competitive wine market in the U.S. So there are a lot of examples of Macedonian companies that are competing very well in the U.S. We hope to see more. The real question now is, how do we encourage these positive trends to continue? I may not be the best person to answer this because I'm not a businessman. However, in my role as U.S. ambassador and in other positions that I've held with the Department of State, I've talked with many CEOs and successful business leaders over the years. And what I've learned from them is that most American firms are looking for very similar things when they look around the world for places to invest and places to put their money. Much of what they're looking for is obvious. They're looking for reasonable wage scales. They're looking for educated and skilled workforce. They're looking for possible tax incentives. They're looking for good location. They're obviously looking for infrastructure. And they're looking for transportation. And I know that just in my conversations with the Chief Executive Officer of Kemet just the other day, all of those were important factors in their decision to come here. And they were particularly pleased with the educated and skilled workforce, which they found here in Macedonia. However, investor after investor has also told me that the single most important requirement for them, what they look at the most when they decide where to invest, is a stable, predictable, and well-functioning business and legal environment. And they mentioned usually 3 general characteristics that they're looking for when they're looking for this positive environment. First is, most companies know that no matter how well they operate, that over time, at some point, they're going to need to rely on the court system in the country in which they're locating. Because no matter how clearly their contracts read, no matter how clear the laws and the regulations are, even the most ethical of companies eventually is going to run into some kind of a legal dispute or a legal disagreement, and they're going to need to resort to the courts. So they're going to want to invest in countries that have a fair and a transparent and a well-functioning judicial system. Secondly, companies need to know that they're going to be interacting well with local government. They're going to be attracted to countries with little corruption, little cronyism. They also want to locate in markets that have skilled and effective public administrators rather than markets that are hampered by red tape or by unwieldy bureaucracy. They want to get things done. They don't want to stand in line for a license for 6 or 7 months or go from door to door to door. They want to know where they can go to get answers. And third, successful companies know that in order to succeed, they have to continually improve. And therefore, they want to invest in markets that have a strong element of entrepreneurship. They want to find people who are going to have creative new ideas that can help their business improve. So what I find really interesting about all three of these ideals, a fair and efficient justice system, a professional and honest public administration, and a strong culture of entrepreneurship, is that all of these ideals are specifically supported and encouraged by the Euro-Atlantic community, by the EU, by NATO, and by the community as a whole. So as Macedonia chooses to move forward as a full member of the Euro-Atlantic community, it's also choosing at the same time to support the policies and the goals that will lead to a better business environment and to greater economic prosperity for all of its citizens. So as Macedonia continues down this path by strengthening its economy and taking its place at the Euro-Atlantic table, Macedonia will find, I think, the U.S. continues to be a steadfast partner with them. Now, this marriage of economic and political goals makes, I think, Macedonia's path forward pretty clear. As Macedonia integrates into the Euro-Atlantic community, Macedonia will be closer to achieving both its political and its economic goals. We all know often in life there are trade-offs. You have to choose one thing or the other thing. You can't have both. But in this case, I think the big policy choice facing Macedonia is actually pretty straightforward. You can have both. Pursuing the Euro-Atlantic agenda, though it's challenging, will bolster Macedonia's national security. It will ensure the continuing development of democratic freedoms and rule of law, but also accelerates the pace of economic development. It accelerates the pace of job creation and attacks unemployment, obviously, at the same time. So as I said in my opening, I think these are the goals and ideals that everyone here can agree on. I think we all see those as the path forward. They all lead to increased prosperity and the freedom that all Macedonian citizens desire. And I hope that through this conference we can help to work to move forward toward those goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the partnership of U.S. government and U.S. businesses with Macedonia. We have signed the Declaration for Strategic Partnership and Cooperation, which is based strengthening further our cooperation and our partnership. As you mentioned, yesterday we were attending the ceremony of opening of a big facility of Kemet. If I just mention two biggest U.S. investments combined, Johnson Controls and Kemet, together when they will be in their last stages, they will employ 2,500 people, new jobs. And the economy, every new job in greenfield investment is creating 3 to 4 additional jobs, which means we're speaking about 10,000 jobs just from those two investments. And as you know, Macedonian government is paying special attention. The economic team of the government was 2 months ago in the United States, and back in November, this November and December, we are going to have another 4 business forums trying to attract more investments, but also encourage trade with the United States. Now I would like to use this opportunity to invite Ambassador Vaschuk, Ambassador of Canada to Macedonia, but also he's accredited to Serbia and Montenegro. He was holding high positions in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Canada. And Mr. Vaschuk, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, chers collègues, počitувani dame I gospodo, čest mi je I zadovoljstvo da bidam sa vas na prvi od delovan summit Makedonije 2025, особено I pоради тоа што, како што разбрав, поттикот I дел од подготовката доаѓа од Канада. Much has been written in recent years about transnational networks. They come in different shapes, sizes, and shades. What I see emerging here is a global network of high achievers drawn together by a common heritage and firmly focused on a brighter future for the Republic of Macedonia and its people. And with that focus come benefits for all of Macedonia's partners, and Canada is proud to be one of them. While Canada has not been untouched by the current global economic crisis, it has managed to weather this storm better than a number of its closest partners. Canada entered the global recession with a strong record of balanced budgets and low debt. Today, Canada has the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7, according to your colleagues at the IMF. Canada is on track to return to a balanced budget over the medium term in the next 2 years. In addition, the federal debt to GDP ratio is projected to decline to 30% by 2015-2016. This is the kind of prudent budgeting that has also been a hallmark of Macedonia's approach. In fact, I kind of suspect that Prime Minister Harper and Prime Minister Gruevski are trading macroeconomic notes behind my back. So close is the alignment of many of the numbers. Canada's strength is underpinned by the world's most stable financial sector. For the 5th straight year, the World Economic Forum has rated Canada's banking system as the world's soundest. During the financial crisis, no Canadian bank or insurer failed, none required bailouts. With that basis, outflows of Canadian direct investment grew nearly 14% last year, strengthening our country's position as a net foreign investor. Taken together, this is a strong basis for strong corporate balance sheets and credible government export financing, allowing Canadians to look to diversifying their investment abroad. And it's also an alignment of diaspora presence and national financial strength. Macedonia and its government have recognized the economic potential in our relationship. This summer, Prime Minister Gruevski pitched Macedonia to some of Canada's leading corporations. I'm here to tell you that the follow-up on major infrastructure opportunities and other economic opportunities has already started. This government-to-government activity, though, tracks close and intense people-to-people ties. In over a century of settlement in Canada, Macedonians have achieved countless individual successes in business, usually starting out by meeting other people's need for warm hospitality. Yet these pioneers not only put in the long hours, literally putting food on the table, but also found the energy to organize in church parishes, restaurant associations, and cultural groups. They created a community life firmly rooted in Canadian reality while laying the foundation for building ties with the new Macedonia once independence came in 20 years ago. By that time, enterprising Macedonian Canadian professionals could as easily be found in the boardroom, the operating room, or indeed in a Canadian embassy as in the kitchen or on the assembly line. Indeed, it is this high level of business skills, education, and connections which this gathering seeks to tap for economic development here in Southeast Europe. Over the past 20 years, turning ties of kinship and friendship into tangible business realities has not been easy. There have been disappointments along the way, and a need to bridge the expectations gap between the business culture of North America and that of a transition economy in the Balkans. But where there's a will, there's a way. Municipalities have sought greater understanding through twinning. The lakeside cities of Ohrid, right here, and Windsor, Ontario, are now re-energizing their relationship. But there's also a practical business parallel. Minivans built in Windsor, now rebadged as Lancias, are for the first time now crossing the ocean to this regional market. Canadian companies are helping Macedonia capitalize on its natural riches. Euromax of Vancouver will be investing hundreds of millions in the newly discovered Ilovica copper gold mine near Strumica, with local and national benefit to the Macedonian economy as well as to its shareholders. The company tells me that it is delighted with the support it has received from the Macedonian authorities. I don't often get these requests from companies to say how delighted they are with the business environment, as evidenced by the signing of the exploitation concession agreement earlier this year. Euromax tell me they're committed to using the most modern mining techniques in the industry and are already working on site to ensure the mine is developed to the highest EU and global environmental and social standards, starting with 2 new wells in local villages and a local information center. Canadian companies are also tapping into Macedonia's wealth of technical talent. Cosmic Developments rise to being one of Macedonia's top employers within 2 years of, best employers, within 2 years of startup as a full-service web and app programming shop, is a prime example of smart, socially responsible entrepreneurship. I'd mentioned roadshow follow-up on infrastructure. 2 vice presidents from Canada's biggest engineering company, SNC-Lavalin, are with me this weekend discussing how best to structure hydropower development opportunities so that long-planned projects to generate more electricity can get off the ground. If at some time, like 3 o'clock in the morning, you've wanted to pop out for a candy bar or maybe pay a utility bill in Macedonia, you probably would have wandered into a convenience store which has a Macedonian-Canadian connection, tobacco. Another example of how models from North America can be usefully and profitably adopted in the Macedonian environment. Macedonia has also become the regional platform for Canadian meat and poultry supplies into the regional market, and I notice that converges with one of the goals set out in your mission statement, making Macedonian end products more competitive. And now, International Food Terminal and export packers are looking into value-added processing here and shipping Macedonian product to the region and back to North America as well. To top it all off, you've got the bakery, we've got the sweetener. Macedonia is also the regional center for packaging and distribution of maple syrup for Southeast Europe. That most iconic Canadian brand, but Vitalia, again a family success story, is now also shipping premium mueslis into Canada. So all these examples signal to me that the time is now, the time is ripe for taking our business relationship with Macedonia to the next level. I know that Prime Minister Gruevski, who has taken the roadshow to Canada, agrees. And so, togaš, ajde zajedno da go napravimo to. Благодаря.
Thank you, Ambassador Vasyuk. Thank you for your presentation. And Canada and Toronto are the birthplace of Macedonia 2025. Mike Zafirowski explained us how the idea was born in Toronto. Thank you for sharing the similarities of macroeconomic policies between your country and Macedonia. We are very proud. And also thank you for your companies investing in Macedonia, companies from Canada in mining sector, in IT sector, in infrastructure and other. And Macedonian government is working hard to create conditions to attract even more investors. And here we have a rector of the new university established here in Ohrid for IT, with American professors and Canadian experience to create more educated, skillful workforce to attract more investors. Now I would like to invite for the comments Alexander Timan, the resident representative of IMF in Macedonia. He was holding high positions in IMF, International Monetary Fund, and monetary and capital markets and European departments. As well, he was working in the research department of Dutch Central Bank. Alexander, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, and thanks to the organization of Macedonia 2025 to organize this forum and to invite me to speak here. What I will speak about today is, very briefly, I prepared a few slides. Dr. Karim actually already sketched a little bit the outlook for the global economy, so I won't go into that. In addition, everybody knows that the euro area crisis affected the whole region of the Western Balkans in terms of a heavy growth impact. So I also don't really focus on that so much. What I will focus on a little bit is the regional perspective in the last year and a half. Things started to go better. In 2010, as the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance already mentioned, in 2010 and the first half of 2011, things started to look better. Not just in Macedonia, but in many countries in the region. So what happened? I mean, why did things actually deteriorate again in the second half of 2011 and continuing into this year? So I'll talk about that a little bit. Then I'll put Macedonia's economic performance into that framework. And at the end, you know, being the IMF, I'll also mention a few things about risks going forward. So let me start with what happened in 2011. Initially, on the financial side, this region was not that much affected. Of course, growth was majorly affected in 2009, but on the financial side, we didn't see that many things happening. That is really something that changed in 2011. When in Europe, the initial growth problem translated into a sovereign debt crisis. This is something that majorly affected the euro area periphery, of course. But we also saw actually these things happening in this region. And I just put up a few graphs there. I mean, no need to look at the details. The main point here is that you know, these graphs, they spike upwards. This means basically more risk. The graph that goes downward is basically a composite stock market index of the region. So, this is where you see the effects that were quite pronounced in 2011. And that, of course, had its effect region-wide, where you see that in many countries in this region, and this region being very broadly Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe, capital inflows turned negative, and exchange rates in many countries came under pressure. And I have a few of them in this graph. However, as we know, not all countries were equally affected. So one lesson to take away is that the countries that were more vulnerable before the crisis actually were hit much more than others. And this is actually where I want to turn to Macedonia. Macedonia and the crisis, if you look at growth, of course it was hit in 2009. It rebounded in 2010, the first half of 2011. But then decreased again in the second half of last year until about now. Our overall forecast for growth are about 1% this year, might even be a little bit lower, and about 2% next year, which is actually to a very large extent driven by foreign investment coming online, new foreign investment coming online. This is a major contribution to the domestic economy. If you see, for instance, Macedonia's export performance in the first 8 months of the year is pretty much flat. Now, in the current environment, to have a flat export performance is a major achievement. So underlying, what do we see here? Underlying, we do see that some of the more traditional Macedonian companies are exporting less, but you see the new foreign direct investment coming online and exporting much more. So overall, this about balances out, which again, I would say, is a major achievement. So most important of all, I think, for investors and for the IMF, I have to say, is that stability has been maintained. On the monetary side, of course, a major sign of this is the fixed exchange rate, which, by the way, has been fixed since '95 and actually has been stable since 1997. So 1997 until now, we're talking about 15 years. We're talking about economic good times. We're talking about economic very hard times. We're talking about a major security crisis. We're talking about economic sanctions to neighboring countries. So throughout all of this, the exchange rate remains stable. So this is not possible if you don't have solid policies underlying this. Financial sector has been quite stable. I think this was also mentioned already before. The banks and banking supervision, for that matter, have generated a financial system which is financing itself from domestic deposit. It's not reliant on money flowing in from other countries, which again turned out to be a major sign of stability in the crisis, where many other countries that were actually dependent on inflows from other countries, there the financial system was hit to a much larger extent. Third point, fiscal. As the Minister of Finance already mentioned, overall moderate debt levels and moderate deficits. So this is obviously important if you look around and you see a sovereign debt crisis. If you're a country with 30% public debt, that's unlikely to hit you. And that, again, I would stress, is a major achievement. It's not something you can do over a year. This is something that requires, in the case of Macedonia, I would say a decade of policies geared towards this kind of fiscal stability. Importantly also is, of course, external stability, where the country has a large trade deficit. It imports much more than it exports, but that is, to a very large extent, compensated by private inflows. So that results that the current account deficit overall has been quite modest in the last few years. And again, if you have a current account deficit, it has to be financed some way. But the main source of financing here is actually the foreign direct investment, which has been quite successful, especially, I would say, 2011 and into this year. Of course, 2009, 2010, companies worldwide were not that much interested in investing. Not for any reason that has to do with Macedonia, but basically that had to do with the global uncertainty. So overall, I would say that the economic storm that has been going on around Macedonia has weathered this storm rather well. And this was due to the policies and some of the buffers that the country has. Sound macro policies, modest public debt, a big stock of foreign exchange reserves, which you need if you want to have a stable exchange rate. You have to back that up. Limited cross-border financial linkages. This is the non-dependence of the financial sector on foreign inflows. Of course, there's also something there that is changing. The next point, Macedonia is not as integrated in European supply chains as some of the Central and Eastern European countries. If you take a Czech Republic or a Hungary, they're very much integrated with German supply chains. It's a little bit less here. Now, of course, this is something that is changing at the moment with all the foreign investment coming in. But I would say that this attraction of FDI overall is quite successful. So some of the challenges going forward, I mean, there always are challenges for every country. Immediate challenges, of course, are the euro area crisis. So to maintain the stability that is here, the confidence, the financing, this is not self-evident. I mean, you really have to maintain your policies in order to keep these assets, and I think that's actually the focus of the government on the both on the fiscal side and on the monetary side. So in the medium term, of course, what is important is to formulate clear goals and integrate those in all your policies. And I think one of the goals, of course, is what you're all here for today. One of the goals is to attract more foreign investors and attract more production capacity, create more jobs, create more exports. So this is a clear goal, and there's clear policies around this goal that actually have been implemented and are continue to be implemented. In the long run, I would say, of course, a big challenge remains the very high unemployment level. Official statistics show a very high unemployment level. In fact, it might be a little bit lower because there is of course, a grey economy, but still, it is very high, it is very persistent, and this is not easy to solve. Education is of course, educating the workforce is part of the story. But I also think, again, that this is where this summit comes in. Entrepreneurship is another big part of the story. And indeed, companies, investors assisting the local universities, the local schools by making clear to them what is the kind of skills that we actually need in a modern business environment. Again, this is a very long-term thing. You know, you start these policies, you start doing this. This will create benefits in maybe a decade's time. But it's very important and it's very worthwhile. Maybe overall, some of the key risks, and this is again back to the regional perspective. This is not just for Macedonia, but of course there is the big risk of the euro area. There are strong links to the euro area. It is the export destination of some 45% of exports from the region. For Macedonia, it's even more. It's a little bit more than 60% that goes to the euro area. Goes to the EU. And if you account for also the exports that go to other countries that are in turn reliant on the EU, like Serbia, then you come to a number of something like 90% of Macedonian exports are somehow linked to the economic prospects of the EU. So this is extremely important. You have the financial linkages, and you have maybe not unimportant the linkages in terms of confidence, remittances, and commodity prices, which you know you can't influence much as Macedonia. Maybe a very last slide, which is about overcoming the euro area crisis. And this is a slide that has maybe less to do with the rest of my talk here, but this is a slide. I mean, if I wouldn't put this slide here, I suspect the question would come. So let me preempt that. We just had our twice a year gathering of very senior worldwide officials from finance ministries, from central banks, with the IMF and World Bank. This year it was last weekend in Tokyo. The main messages coming out of that meeting with respect to the euro area is that, first of all, significant progress has been made. And I think the finance minister already mentioned it, the ECB's program to buy bonds, to commit to buying bonds, the launch of the European Stability Mechanism, which is basically a huge pot of money that is there to support countries in trouble, and the agreement to move towards a banking and a fiscal union. So these are very important items of progress, which by standards of Europe have been made rather quickly. Of course, the problem now is that, okay, now you have to implement all of this. And implementation, I think, is key. And the speed, I mean, there's very ambitious plans. The banking union should be in place by the end of this year. Now, that is extremely fast. I'm not sure if that's even feasible, but still, do it as fast as possible. The scope, things like, okay, you can say banking union, you can say fiscal union, but what does it mean? I mean, it can mean different things to different people. So what exactly are the elements that you want to put in place? And of course, coordination. I mean, there's 27 members of the EU. There is the Eurozone, there is the non-Eurozone EU countries. You have to coordinate all of this with all of them, which is difficult enough as it is. Maybe the depth and the length of the crisis has actually focused the minds a bit more on this, and I think there are good prospects for this kind of coordination. As a last point, also relevant for the countries in Southeast Europe, further structural reform to boost growth and employment. Again, this is no silver bullet, but this is something that many European countries need, and that will hopefully yield some results in the medium to long run. So let me stop there, and thank you again very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tiemann, for sharing encouraging analysis of the IMF of the macroeconomic stability of Macedonia, and also sharing your views how future we should keep that macroeconomic stability and create strong economic growth. Now I would like to invite to take the floor Sami Alac. He has a very distinguished career. He is CEO of Siemens Nokia Networks. Also, he was president of Northern Carrier Voice and IP Solutions, as well as he has held leadership and management roles in Bell Canada. I would like to thank especially coming last night, this morning to Ohrid, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Good morning, everyone, and I am very honored to be here today. You know, Macedonia is very dear to my heart, driven by two brothers I have in Macedonia, Mike and Robert. So I'm happy as well to have a fellow Canadian by my side, so which is very interesting and very encouraging. What I would like to share with you a different perspective than my colleagues here, which is a business perspective around technology and telecom, and the importance of technology and telecom to Macedonia, and how they can generate potential business opportunity for Macedonia, not only driven by local economies, but as well as by global players like Nokia Siemens. What is very important first to understand the dynamics of the telecom industry. So we live today in a hyper-connected world, and Mike and I, we had the opportunity to work closely to drive many things and a success in the hyper-connected world. So what do we mean by hyper-connected world? Is where every device that can be connected will be connected. It's a very simple philosophy. You know, this will go to a point that managed networks can be built just by connecting cars together. Just imagine how this philosophy can go far. But what does that mean, hyper-connected world, to all of us? And two things. One is about having mobility in the center of this hyper-connected world. When you look today in the mobile networks, we have around 5 billion customers worldwide in mobile. 5 billion customers, generating around 1.3 billion euros of revenues annually. So mobile is becoming the largest sector of the ICT sector worldwide. So, but at the same time, mobile is connecting 4 times as many people as land time today. And this is really is being accelerated by the number of devices that each one of us has. I travel, and many of you travel, with at least 3, 4, 5 devices now. So, and why is that? This is driven by the convenience of mobility. Convenience of mobility, which is the lowest cost, reach, and the ease of deployment in very harsh conditions. But what is very important now to understand is what is the fueling the growth of the mobile infrastructure and how it can present a potential business opportunity for all of us. The first is about data. It's not anymore the connection that is important or the device that is important, is the data. Data is the new currency in a new network world. And the data is growing exponentially. Data is growing exponentially to a point that surpassed 1 zettabyte in 2010. What is 1 zettabyte is? 1 zettabyte is 1,000 exabytes, and 1 exabyte is 1,000 petabytes, and 1 petabyte is 1,000 terabytes, and 1 terabyte is 1,000 gigabytes. So just imagine the size of data that is flowing around the world. And this is really is expected to double every 2 years going forward. So the second element is leveraging data. It's a smartphones or a smart mobile computing devices. So the global scale and rapid growth of mobile broadband infrastructure continue to enable the acceleration of adoption of mobile computing devices. It's not anymore smartphones. So when you look at the number of smartphones is really in the world, surpass the number of total PCs in the world in 2011. Surpass the number of PCs deployed in the world, and expected to grow by almost 4 billion over the next 3 years. By 2015, where total PCs are expected to be deployed around, it's 1 billion, and the smartphone to be around 2 billion in that year. So just imagine the explosion of mobile computing devices that will be available. So what does that mean to all of us? That these devices will be the source of innovation and will be the source of economic growth in everything we do, in every sector of the economy as we are moving forward. So, what does that mean? This data grows, as well as the smartphone growth or mobile computing devices growth for emerging markets like Macedonia. If we take the India example, and specifically many of the emerging markets which have started to liberalize their telecom infrastructure. It's around in 2004, this is really where we started to operate in the Nokia Siemens very aggressively in India. And then since that time, the liberalization of the telecom market started. Now we have in India 970 million mobile users out of 1.2 billion people. And guess what? The business case for the operators that is being done in India is when average revenue per user is less than $3 per month. So imagine that the transformation that has to be made in India in order to build the cost-effective infrastructure, a cost to run networks at a point that the operators can make money from users with $3 per month. At the same time, we have to recognize that in India, now there is only 35 million landlines. So just imagine how much over the last 8 years, mobile was in the core of the Indian economic growth. But if we extend the thought a bit and we say, what would be the value or how Western corporations can leverage the power of the emerging markets and leverage the power of this economic growth in the emerging markets. One thing is really what it comes to mind immediately, the low cost of labor. And if you look, this is really, we have done it in Nortel, Mike and I, where we continually moved resources from Canada and the US and Western country to low-cost country geographies in order to optimize the cost and improve our profitability. And we did it massively to a point that almost 60% of the resources were in the low-cost countries. In Nokia Siemens today, we are around 55% in the low-cost geographies. But at the same time, we leverage significant partners in the low-cost geographies. An example of that, and if you look today to, I don't know to what extent you heard about the Nano, which is really the car that was designed by Tata, which is really with the objective to be built with the $2,000 mark. And guess what? This car is now being adapted to become a, if you like, acceptable car for many countries in Western Europe as well as in the US. Certainly there is a lot of regulations has to be dealt with, but at least the intent is really that for Tata 2000 car will be available worldwide and will create significant disruption in the industry, in the automotive industry. But while we know that Tata was coming with a strategy for low-cost car, at the same time Tata has a strategy for luxury cars. And they are the owner now of, British brands like Jaguar and the Land Rover. So it's not anymore Tata, the low-cost provider, is becoming an innovator and a driving aggressive expansion from emerging market to Western countries to drive economic growth. In addition to that, if we look on the other side now, like company like Apple, most of the software that is developed for Apple today, most of it is being done in India, in companies like TCS and Infosys, Tata Communications Group and Infosys. So what does it take in order for emerging market like Macedonia to be successful in this dynamic and the global economy and participating in the growth? And what does it take in some instances to attract large corporations like Nokia Siemens into Macedonia? One is of a great importance is specialized education. It's not anymore about education, it's a specialized education that is focused on areas of growth and where Macedonia can build a competitive advantage. So if you look in the state of technology, specialized education in software, in the mobile applications, in data centers. Just I give you an example. Today, I sit on a board in Canada, and they have a data center, this company, in San Diego, in the US, serving customers in Asia and in Europe. And guess what? Building data centers in Macedonia is not a complex task. However, it requires specialized skills, specialized talent to run and build data centers. Second is about, for companies like Nokia Siemens, it's very important the political stability. So this is we look always for this key element by which we are comfortable with the local governments, the policies that are being established in order to allow us to work in a very flexible and certainly way to generate growth and a profit. Cost. Cost is extremely important, cost competitive. One thing I want to tell you, in a challenge in emerging markets like China and India, today they are not anymore competitive for us. They are becoming high cost for us. So having said that, is to how emerging market is to become cost competitive is extremely important. One thing is, yes, we went in India as Nokia Siemens in 2004, and we have 15,000 people now working for us in India, serving the local market, but at the same time, we have two of the largest global services, delivery services, by which we support 250 million subscribers around the world from India. But we are facing a challenge. The cost of each resource is becoming high. We are facing a challenge that attrition, that we have to change almost 1 of the 5 employees every year, is becoming a challenge. But at the same time, what we have done recently, we changed our strategy, is by which now we are focusing more and more to countries like in East Europe. We have a now major lab in Budapest, yeah? Now where we have close to 2,000 people. And the reason for that is, as well, we have engineering partners here in Eastern Europe like Ukraine. And the reason for that, we have more stability from a workforce perspective, more stability from a retention perspective. So just to give you an example of Budapest, so we have a very high quality and a skilled resource pool. This is extremely important for us. The labor rate is very competitive. It is very competitive comparing to India and comparing to China, but at equal cost as Vietnam. So that's why we are expanding in Vietnam, and we are expanding here in Eastern Europe. We have a solid and a loyal senior management team. So this is really loyalty. What we are finding in Eastern Europe is it's a higher than if you look in Asia. So the mobility of resources between companies is less than it is the case in Asia. And we are creating more attractive workplace to people by which they can stay longer and longer on the job. And more importantly, we have a facility to drive more cooperation with local companies and with universities. So these are all important elements that can be leveraged as a model for Macedonia in order to develop economic growth, leverage the talent in very specialized way, and to attract companies like Nokia Siemens in order to perform business in Macedonia.
Victor Misa just told me Macedonia is 1/2 the cost of Hungary.
Oh, okay. Happy to hear that. Thank you.
I have now a privilege to ask for the floor from Dr. Kurt Geiger. Kurt, you introduced this last night, so I don't need to do additional introduction. It's our pleasure to have you speaking at the panel.
After this very good news that there are sectors in the economy where there are still growth opportunities, I think it's probably not so good to speak about the general economy as a whole. But over the last 15 years of this period of transition, Central and Eastern Europe has really had much higher growth rates for really two reasons. First of all, the economies were very much underdeveloped, and with the openness of the markets, there was a big push of convergence and a great support from the European Union for more integration into the, so to say, old EU. And this has really led to a very big growth in the region, the country, which has benefited. But these countries, and I think have a particular advantage that they have not become oversatisfied. They have not overeaten, basically, in standards they have and aspirations they have. The population in the region, I think, has a much higher capacity of constraint and have not demands of entitlements as Western Europe, I think, is really suffering from. And we are seeing it now from the need to reduce lots of social benefits and opportunities which are there. The particular advantage, as I also said last night, yesterday, about Macedonia was really that it wasn't really a target for many investments of foreign investors. And you also have here a very solid and strong banking system. We have 3 large banks in the country that are really solid and are really not so much dependent on the funding from the parent because it's being built by deposits. And this will allow also for a good growth. In general, all economists, I think, are in agreement, and all data one looks at is that if there's any growth in Western Europe, there will be more growth in CEE. And I think this is very, very clear. And you have the particular advantage that you also have a solid financial services industry here. So the question really should be interesting in the debate is on how we can, or Macedonia can attract investors like Nokia Siemens, and where really the competitive advantages are here. And I do think it's possible to mobilize these strengths, and which really will lead to the building of a strong and solid economy and a more prosperous society.
Thank you, Dr. Geiger. Now we'll open the floor for the questions and answers from the audience.
Good afternoon. My name is Nui Vezai. I'm an American company. We are importers of wines from the southeastern European region. And we're here particularly interested in wines of Macedonia, exporting them to the United States. I've had an opportunity to visit some of the wine growing regions. And I've noticed some manufacturing taking place in, for example, Kavadarci. I know in the municipality, in the local government's haste for attracting manufacturing, is there a supervisory board that is monitoring the effects of a manufacturing facility near a wine-growing region that's open to everyone here who can answer that?
There are certain regulations regarding the protection of the environment, and we have a Ministry of Environment which is taking care of the implementing of those regulations. And I understand your concerns, and we as a government are also concerned about that, and we work hard with the industries in those regions to improve their environment.
Hi, I have a question actually for Mr. Samuel Hogg from Nokia Siemens Networks. Just a quick introduction. I am Veli Samak, Minister of FDI. When you're actually, telecom currently is actually in a pretty tough spot, especially in Europe. I mean, we hear it from all the other industries. Are you seeing a trend of just moving a lot of the facilities away from Europe, whether it's manufacturing or R&D, or do you still think there's a commitment to be in the region or in particular areas in the European continent?
So As it relates to R&D, I separate R&D and manufacturing actually because they are two different, requires different perspective around how you can optimize cost in each one of them. From R&D perspective, in the past we used to look only on Asia. And yes, we started to go India and China, and then we are expanding into Vietnam. But now, I can assure you, Europe is on the map, Eastern Europe specifically, to allow us to continue to drive innovation in R&D in Europe. So, and even we are taking specific actions in order to deal with the high attrition that we are facing in Asia, and the alternative that we are using is really Eastern Europe. So this is really from R&D perspective, will be move of more from Western Europe to Eastern Europe. And this is driven by a very structured approach how we do that. We develop competency model, what competency we would like to develop where, depending on the talent that we may have in the different countries. As you can imagine, it's very hard to get all competencies that you need to build large-scale business like us in a single country. So hence, we have a competency model. As it relates to manufacturing, we have a very aggressive strategy to consolidate manufacturing. At this point in time, we use almost 30% of our requirement for manufacturing is done by EMSs or large-scale corporations that they focus only on manufacturing. So in a very volatile economic environment, moving from a fixed cost to variable cost, this is one of the key strategies that I'm driving. So what does that mean? We will continue to drive very focused approach, like Nokia Siemens, to continue to do things either in Europe or in the low-cost countries. To be at this point in time for us, manufacturing is in India and China. The reason for that, it's because you need the scale, and the low-cost manufacturing is really, you can achieve it in Asia today, which is at a lower cost than in Europe, which is different situation than in R&D. However, we are keeping some manufacturing capability in Europe, which is driven not necessarily in a volume-driven manufacturing, but what we call it's a value-add based manufacturing, supporting our R&D team in order to drive initial prototypes and so on. So it's a strategy that scan across the board between high cost, low cost, East Europe, and Western Europe.
Mr. Geiger would like to add something.
May I ask you a question? How could small countries or any country maintain these kind of investments, because the economy today and corporations have become very global and very flexible in many ways what they can do. We see it alone on the car production, for instance, not only on the IT side, how much this has all moved to China in a way, you know, and that they're producing cars there for the Western market. So what can countries do to actually maintain that kind of investment from strategic investors?
So the view I have is a focus, specialization, and competitiveness. Focus, specialization, and competitiveness. You know, in my view, the times for general business scope is gone or become more and more difficult. So the more you will see that more specialized companies that really they will be more successful. And then it's driven by the complexity of the world we live in, by the different parameters that influence the economic model. So having said that, the lesser number of parameters that you have in order to optimize the economic or business model, the better chance you have in order to maintain competitive. Second is the world is very small. Yeah, it's certainly, you know, today, as I mentioned, the small company in Canada, which is really with the 40 million revenues, has a data center in the US serving customer in Asia. So it's, the small company in Canada, which is with 400 people, is only an example of why this company cannot exist elsewhere. It's driven by specialization, perfection of what they do at the lowest cost possible.
First of all, I would like to give credit to everyone because everyone didn't miss the opportunity to mention the education and more notably the math, science and technology like Mike mentioned, which is important to create new businesses. So my question is the following. Let's say on policy level and on strategic level, the picture is clear. Everyone agrees that education and also education in science and technologies and research is very important. But to go to the next step, I think in Macedonia what we miss is the investment from the businesses into this. I would use some terminology like long-term evolution, which is used in the 4G right now, like Mike and the director of NSN is familiar with that. So my question is how the businesses look the next step. Like the Macedonian government has done an amazing job by supporting this elite university. It's for the first time creating a research university in Macedonia. And now the ball is, it has been passed from the government and policymakers to the businesses. So how they can support more and more research and development, like to match the most developed countries. Like we know Japan is leading the situation, US is not lacking too much, and then in Europe we have only maybe Finland and Sweden that invest more than 2.something% in R&D. And as we know, in most of these developed countries, the big chunk of the R&D is taken over by the industry, not only by the government. So how businesses can help us? Thank you.
The connection between the educational institutions and private businesses is very important. We have a lot of examples in the United States. Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley because of the Stanford University. Yeah. And also, as you know, the government is trying to help to create those kind of incubators. And you as a university, private businesses, they have to come together. That's part of your, how to say, tasks and job.
I was just going to add that our experience as we speak with business leaders here in Macedonia, and it's true elsewhere too, is there's a need for a very strong partnership between business and education. All too often people finish school, not just here, but in many places in the world, especially as the trends in science and technology are accelerating. They finish school with skills which are no longer up to date. They may be out of date even within the last 2 or 3 years. So it's very important that schools, or universities in particular, have a linkage with business, and that they work together to see what are the skills that businesses need, and don't produce people that have skills that were great for 2008. You need skills for 2013, 2015, and those are changing rapidly.
Very good. What I'm going to suggest is that Živko Mukaetov and Minchi Jordanov can comment on this tomorrow. Okay. Živko in panel number 5, and Mincho is part of the closing comments. Obviously a very hot topic, and so I think it'll be very useful. Another comment and a question, comment, Sami, you're becoming a very popular person here. So maybe you can listen carefully and take some notes on panels 2 and 3. I think you'll be impressed with what you're going to hear. But the question is that on the macroeconomic stability that Macedonia has been able to deliver the last 10 years. Now, we have a background, there's a broad brush. The Europeans have not done a good job controlling their finances. Not only Greece, but Portugal, Spain, France, the list goes on. So question from all the people here, but particularly IMF and with your background, Kurt, are we doing enough to either advocate or for people to know what has happened to this point in time and to really position Macedonia in a better light along with cost base and incentives, that this is a country that has done again, a very good job in a very, very tough environment to make sure that despite temptations to control spending and to provide this foundation for the future. So I'd love to get your perspectives or from anybody else from this panel.
What else can you do? I mean, in this case, it is of course somewhat limited because you're a country of 2 million people, and you have a market of 400 million next door that is not doing great, to say the least. So in that sense, there's not that much you can influence that. Of course, what can you do domestically is maintain this stability. And of course, things like the government running a deficit in these times, that's pretty normal, because actually that's what you would want to see. You have a low debt level, you can actually afford to run a deficit in order to stimulate the economy somewhat. Of course, the question is, what do you do with this stimulus? Where do you put it? And education has been mentioned many times as something that is a very worthwhile goal of investing in. Of course, again, it's no silver bullet. If you invest this year in education and you did it last year and you did it 5 years ago, maybe you start to see the benefits for real in 5 years from now. One of the things I think about why this stability is so important, I think that even if Europe does all the right things, pushes all the right buttons, the effects of the crisis are going to be with us for quite some time, and that means years. So this is not something that, if everything goes well in 2014, we have forgotten all about it. No, I think this is going to be with us for quite some time, and therefore it is, of course, more and more challenging to maintain this kind of stability, because when the crisis starts, you have, let's say, some fat on your bones. You can consume that fat. By now, and this is not just for Macedonia, for many countries in the region, the fat is gone. So the challenges maybe are actually more difficult now in the coming years than they were in the years in the first years immediately after the crisis. So I mean, I don't think this is a full answer to your question. This is as good as it gets from my perspective, because basically, if I had the full answer, I would go around the world and preach it. So I can't say much more about it.
No, but actually, the question also was: is there enough knowledge of the actual situation, and can they be used as a marketing ploy, if you will, to give businesses even more confidence to invest in Macedonia from outside here?
Yeah, so here I think the government strategy has been quite successful, because the government actually from years ago started doing this outreach, putting Macedonia on the map. Then you got the global crisis, and basically nobody invested. So 2009 and 2010, there was not so much success, but still the government kind of kept up this outreach. And I think by 2011, what we have seen, there's many companies that are thinking about investing again, but because Europe is not doing so well, they're thinking, okay, where shall we invest? Let's do it somewhere else. And of course here you have geography, you're close to the market, you can do just-in-time delivery, you have a government that is quite committed and that has also put its money where its mouth is, as evidenced by improved business climate. So I think this is quite important. I think there's many other speakers in the audience actually that have much more expertise on what has been done than I do. But I do think that continuing these kind of things is important, because there's many companies still that have never even heard of the country. So let alone know about the incentives that can be provided. So I'm very happy to see that this has delivered some results in the last few years, and in the medium run, I'm confident that it will keep up. So.
Okay.
If I might just add, from a sort of national branding perspective, I think Macedonia has been doing quite well on that score. There is, I think, a general perception problem in North America. Europe is painted with a single broad brush. I mean, never mind Macedonia, I think most North Americans couldn't identify the fact that Denmark has been doing relatively well compared to, let's say, Portugal. But that is partly, I think, precisely one of those areas where Macedonia 2025 and Macedonian diaspora who are engaged in management and in countries can put their specific empathy and knowledge to work. Whereas the company's CEO may be preoccupied by a whole range of things and can't read detailed country reports for every place in Europe, somebody in the system who happens to know the facts about Macedonia can bring that to the company's attention. And it's really a kind of more detailed work that people who know about the country and know the facts and know the comparative advantages can bring within systems that are very complex and where people are, sometimes not able to focus on specific country situations, but I think that's precisely an area of comparative advantage for this network.
And I would like to use this opportunity to thank Macedonia 2025. A year ago, I had a dinner with a friend of mine, and he was speaking about persons who are giving. And he defined them following. They have love for you, they have care for you, they support you, and not asking anything in return. I'm with the board members of Macedonia 2025 for almost 6 years. I would like to thank them for their love for Macedonia, for their care for Macedonia, and for their support for Macedonia.
Finish.